Hello everyone. Today's talk will be about working with new abstract organizational methods. And so what that means is when we look at the human being, he's either linearly acknowledging things or non-linearly acknowledging things, directly acknowledging things or indirectly acknowledging things in regards to how we maneuver through language and concept and thought. Now, I want you to, for a second, visualize that you have an ability to get let's say a pen, a regular pen, and as you're holding this pen, you're walking outside, and let's say you're walking in the park. And you begin moving this pen in your hand as if, have you seen how they do it with a poker chip? They move the chip between their fingers. So similarly, let's say you're moving this constantly between your fingers back and forth. Do you see this? Now let us say you're walking. So you begin to see as you are walking in the park and this pen is moving in your hand, there is one motion within another motion. So your hand motion is happening while your whole body is moving, right? And you begin to see if you rotate this pen in your hand and you at the same time begin rotating and walking, your mind will begin to acknowledge two movements occurring at a simultaneous moment. So you see what is happening with a person who is using organizational methods to plan his day, whether it's a general about to, plan an action against the enemy of thought, or whether it's a general about to command his army, or if it's a person buying water from a grocery store. Do you know? Organizational methods suggest that we are taking what is here, we're associating and acknowledging that it's moving, and as it is moving through the complexity of what we're seeing that more meaning is being extracted and more things being done. So what that means is, as this pen moves in my hand in that casino chip manner, we begin to see that as I'm walking, it's like there's a movement which is creating interpretation. In other words, the pen in my hand has one meaning and the walk has one meaning. Do you see? Take this into thought, and let us just take this ideology and imagery into the realms of thought, and you begin to see it's that moment where one errand was simultaneously happening alongside another errand, and that errand simultaneously within it had an awareness. So when you go from a kind of, in a fractal manner, study your intelligence, the linearity works pretty well. But if you don't go in a fractal manner and try to not study in a fractal manner, if you don't see connection between things, you will find your creation elusive, because you'll be making considerations of things you don't know. And so we need to realize man doesn't know a lot right now. What that means is he might have the most advanced sciences in regards to where man is now, but it doesn't mean that the most greatest vision is being seen. I hope we really see, because it's simply a matter of the conscious being choosing where he wants the experience of his moment to go. What that means is, if you are in the technology world, if you want to be a being who wants to live in a city that's, let's say, technologically advanced, and you're into that sci-fi way of seeing things, you begin to see that it's very important, because as technology evolves, technology is taking a lot of our jobs. And the last job of technology is the human body, no? So you will begin to see that consciousness will begin to be perhaps very digitalized in some manner, but I don't think these realities should be too thought of as well at this point, because they're not that real, so we'd be working with our abstraction. But Mr. Within finds that you need to see that your choices are leading to what part of the forest you're going to live. This is a forest of existence. Some beings are existing on that part of the world, you're existing in this part of the world. You know, you have access to this part of the world, right? Even though we have globalization, you know, our individuality seems to be distant in any way. You need to see that the nature of a being through a self-recognition of individual consciousness is very different than a being who recognizes through a collective consciousness which needs no interpretation. So sometimes these mystics, these yogis that are coming from the East, the steps of Eastern mysticism in the West is perhaps one of the greatest stories known to man. How Eastern mysticism is very compassionately introducing itself. Because existential teachings are for everything. It's for existence. You're not caring for the association of how you are seeing it separately. You're aware that experience is experience, and based on a simultaneous ability to be existent in many ways, you see that you are choosing how your experience needs to be manifest. What that means is there have been beings who have gone through fires and their meditation has been uninterrupted. Guru Arjan, this guru, actually how I came to know about him was pretty random. I go to a friend's house, this meeting, and suddenly there's a picture of him, and there's a picture of him among other gurus, and just him specifically. I'm like, oh my God, who is that guy? You know, and I become very curious. And I see Guru Arjan was this guru he was a very, very big figure, very, very good figure, you know. In other words, he was a very profound spiritual leader and also a leader in making society advance. But something happens at the end, and he is punished by some ruler in the way where he has to go sit on a burning metal plate, and they're going to pour steel over him, molten steel or something like that. And so this being is so self-aware that he sees he has lost choice, and so he's a martyr. But the way he goes is that as he's going before, his communication is so existentially profound that you see that this being's message is never his words per se, but the state of consciousness where his words were seen. Perhaps that is why many people are attracted to the profound imagery that is found in ancient texts. In the sense that the imagery and how it suggested human life was so much more existentially open and aware of its multidimensional nature than the society now, which is being barred and constantly put into barriers with axioms. Ideology is getting a voice which is becoming our technology. If ideology gets too much of a voice, we might not hear ourselves. And so ask your children, are they looking at trees, nature, or are they looking at cell phones and computers? Or is there a way where there could be a very healthy balance of both? Where knowledge and Google and technology is accessed only when you feel there's a need. Not every moment where you're going through a new experience or you don't know something. Sometimes it requires a very, very courageous being to authentically go in a moment where he doesn't know what to do. But then see that the moment is communicating, and so as you communicate and are aware of your moment of being, you're always transcendentally continuing. Organizational methods are really based on your preference to some degree also. Because what that means is that we are putting our own sense of, how do I say it? We are creating our reality, simply said. And so in the creation of your reality, you're choosing how free you want to work with. Because you can sit down and you can plan for years and you can make a portfolio of just notes on what you're going to do. But if you see that you planned your whole life, you suddenly see you have not lived. And living meant sometimes letting go of the ideology which is constantly trying to satisfy us by giving us certainty. Our certainty needs to be based on our direct experience and not the ideas that are very playfully giving us shoes. Guys, we only need one pair of shoes. You only need one sense of self, which is aware that it's constantly infinitely changing, and you begin to see that personality was just your observance of it. The clarity is found through transcendental observance and the self-remembrance that you are the origination of your awareness. And this you is beyond the forms that one thinks they are. Because you're also the observance of form. And the observer is not limited to how thought should be put. And guys, you need to really understand, when I begin to talk about the observer, you have certain ways to take it, you know. And these certain ways means that in one manner, it means that in one manner, you can engage with the concept of the observer as the ideology and try to think about it and see that you can't find the thinker, so you'll be like, oh, it's only my idea of the thinker. Or you can see that when someone says the observer, he's actually not saying anything at all, because the observer is observing the form, and so the formless presence is your allowance to see life more than what you think it is. And so that concept could be new, and it could be very confusing at first. When it came to me in regards to what I read from Eastern mysticism, I recognized that the question is very important because it is suggesting the space for the answer. And so if our questions are what's after death, when we are choosing without deep, direct experience and self-exploration and deep self-contemplation to choose that we're physical bodies and that there's just emptiness here, then it is our lack of seeing a great world. What that means is you as a being are here to see a very bright world. Beauty is your interpretation, and also what your interpretation is inspiring you to see existentially. Once the states of the being is configured, in a sense you have reached a harmonious state of trusting life, and in a sense saying that everything can be loved. It's very simple. Love doesn't have to be a fluffy image in which you're like, gosh, I don't need that. You know, it's actually an understanding that you're comfortable with the life that is here. So a being who truly understands love means that in your act of giving away all that is, you are all that is. You see? Compassion is a gift for the treasure revealer. The treasure revealer of greater states of self-awareness and experience of reality. You see, guys, I want to also communicate something, and if I don't say it, it would be just ridiculous. Throughout my life, at the beginning, my structure and organizational methods were based on me getting a piece of paper and writing things down on what needs to be done. But when I understood that when you sit down to write things and make a to-do list, that to-do list is not suggesting the states of being and the energy required for those actions. Because you can't tell until you're in the present moment. So I stopped constantly linearly framing things. Sometimes I would make lists, of course, it's a natural thing, do what you like. But I noticed that as I, in a sense, stopped judging the moment beforehand as if I knew what was going to happen in a day, I gave myself an allowance to just walk without knowing what's going to happen, but having certain tasks as if I'm going on a journey throughout the day. As if the moment I open my eyes, the moment I close my eyes, I am progressing and organizing my day based on an abstraction not put before as in planning, linear abstraction in the sense of like I've just made an outline of what I'm going to do, but rather some linear idea of the ground I'm walking in, and then an allowance to experience it for the first time by going in the environment. So you see that it's like taking your organizational methods into a state of improv where you see that penning moving in between your fingers could be very playfully said to be how you're linearly planning your day, but at the same time you are walking. So there's this great movement in this existential life force that is moving things in which we are then an aspect of in which we are creating. And to understand this really means to understand your moment of existence and your moment of absolute being, which is clarity. Because you see, the wrong actions are ones that are done. So the verb there is doing. And doing means man had to move, and movement meant a dualistic consideration had to be chosen. So that moment when the speaker said, "Hello everyone," everybody was said hello to. Do you see? It's like everybody was acknowledged. So similarly, we see that how we open our mouths is suggesting how our worlds are being introduced in our self-awareness in regards to an external manifestation. I noticed that the pilot of consciousness, the advanced communicator, and the being who's really being self-aware existentially is seeing that the tools are ideas, but the idea is not you. If you, for example, so what I mean by that is, if you are walking in the park and you see a bench, and for some random reason, let's say you're like, oh, I'm that bench, I'm not this, I'm just that bench, you'll see that you'll look at that bench and you'll be like, I'm definitely not that bench. Do you see? So similarly, man considering that I'm just a body is on some way similar to just looking at the first thing and being like, okay, I'm just this. But you need a deep self-contemplation in the observance of what this life intelligence is. What I mean is that throughout this life, what I noticed teachers talking about was ideas on life rather than giving the student the actual scenario and the actual vitality of life. How do I say it? The actual experience of life. So again, there's a distinction between the teacher that constantly draws on the board and writes down what a tree is, rather than the teacher that gives the kid a seed to plant. Do you see the quality of attention from life? You must care for the children of this world, and you must care existentially as a human being. And you must also care playfully. You must understand that this reality is transitioning. The human psychology is a different one every day. Every moment, every word is a new sense of association and how your vision is expanding. You might think that you're just listening to simple words, but in your mind, abstractions are happening, worlds are opening, past childhood memories are coming to dance with future projections of how you will be. And so you are seeing that the chaos in your mind was the space where the order found itself to evolve. Trust life, for in that trust, man knows the self through a sense of observing that self and recognizing that, again, not to use the word soul, but that spiritual aspect of experience was the unspeakable view that your whole moment was kept differently. So right now, you as whoever you are maybe think like, okay, there's this life intelligence is the one I'm seeing. But once you go deeper into these states of self-awareness, you begin to see that the state of being transitions the reality. And so when I realized that, you realize you have been many things, because it's as if in your spotlight of attention, if you were just like, if I kept a flashlight suddenly on the river and it lit up a certain spot at night of the river, you would see that all those parts of the river and all those reflections and, let's say, light getting stuck between the water, you kind of see that in that moment, what is in view is based on how wide the flashlight is. And so if man's self-awareness is like a flashlight in this moving intelligence he calls the cosmos, then he must widen his gaze or just stop the flashlight, turn off a temporary sense of self which is trying to figure it out, and go into an existential cocoon and suddenly come out with a knowing that it's not an idea trying to figure out, but it's the cosmos looking back at itself. We are free beyond words, and so there is no limitation in which the limitless is confined to. Much blessings and namaste.